The house didn't feel empty. Not the way an unused room or a forgotten corner of the attic might. This was different. It felt like something was waiting. 1 month earlier, moving in, Maya and I had been looking for a fresh start. We didn't need anything fancy. Just space, peace, and a place we could actually call home. When we found the house on Wren Street, it felt like luck had finally thrown us a bone. 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room, and a big backyard with a view of the woods. It was quiet, tucked away from the main roads, and the price was too good to pass up. The realtor barely made eye contact when she handed us the keys. The last owners moved out suddenly, she said. Bad memories. I should have asked what she meant, but we were too excited to care. The first week was exactly what we hoped for. Nights spent unpacking boxes, cooking easy meals, and falling asleep to the sound of crickets outside the window. Even Maya said it felt too perfect. I should have listened. It was our 7th night in the house when I heard it. Click, click. The unmistakable sound of the front door unlocking. My eyes shot open, the kind of wide-awake panic that floods you with adrenaline before you're even sure why. The room was pitch black except for the faint glow of the clock on my side of the bed, 2:37 a.m. Maya was asleep next to me, breathing slow and steady. But the lock downstairs? That was real. I moved slowly, careful not to wake her, and crept down the stairs barefoot. The air was cold, too cold for a summer night. When I reached the entryway, I found the door still shut, the deadbolt in place. But when I touched the handle, it felt like ice. I stood there, holding my breath, listening. The house was silent. Too silent. That kind of silence that feels like someone else is holding their breath, too. The mark on the wall. The next morning, Maya noticed the stain. A dark smudge near the base of the wall by the staircase. Did you track something in last night? She asked. I didn't answer, because when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't dirt. It was a handprint. Faint, but clear. Too big to be hers. Too big to be mine. The next night, it happened again. The same click of the lock. The same icy draft slipping through the cracks of the door. But this time, when I checked the lock, the door was slightly open. Just enough to let in the night air, carrying with it the scent of wet soil and something sharper. Something that smelled like rot. I shut it, double-locked it, and shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. That night, sleep didn't come. The locked room. By the second week, we found the door in the basement. It was hidden behind an old shelving unit filled with rusted tools and half-empty cans of paint. A thick wooden door, older than the rest of the house. At first, I thought it was just another storage room. But when I tried the handle, it didn't budge. No key in the house fit the lock. It was like the door didn't want to be opened. The journal in the attic. A few days later, I found it in the attic. An old, mold-stained journal wedged between 2 broken floorboards. The handwriting inside was messy, shaky, like whoever wrote it had been in a hurry. Most of it was scribbles and half-finished sentences, but one entry was written over and over across the pages. The door opens. Don't answer it. No matter who's knocking. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in bed, watching the hallway through the crack under the bedroom door. Waiting. The house was too still. Like it was holding something in. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Not on the front door. Not even upstairs. From the basement. At the locked door. Maya stirred beside me, half awake. Chris, did you hear that? I couldn't answer. The knock came again. Closer. Like whoever or whatever was behind that door had just been waiting for us to listen. The knocking didn't stop. It wasn't frantic or rushed, just 3 steady, deliberate knocks. I stayed frozen in bed, every muscle in my body coiled so tight it hurt. I didn't want to wake Maya. Part of me didn't even want to breathe, afraid that whoever was on the other side of that basement door would hear me and what? No, I was listening? I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each knock. 1, 2, 3. And then, nothing. The silence was worse. Eventually, I passed out from exhaustion, but even in sleep, the sound of knocking echoed in the back of my mind. The next morning, the sun felt like a bad joke. Everything looked normal in daylight. Maya was still asleep, her hair messy from tossing around during the night. The house smelled like coffee from the pot I had set on a timer. Outside, birds chirped like they hadn't heard a thing. But I knew what I heard. I waited until Maya went out to run errands before I checked the basement. The door was still there. Still locked. But the air around it felt heavier somehow. The hairs on my arms stood up as soon as I touched the handle. This wasn't just an old door sealed shut by years of disuse. Something was keeping it closed. Or maybe worse, keeping something in. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room waiting for the sound of the door unlocking, or the knocks, or anything that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. At some point, I drifted off. I woke up to the sound of the basement door creaking open. Not a knock this time. A slow, deliberate creak. I shot up from the couch, heart thudding in my chest like a warning bell. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get Maya and leave the house behind, but instead, I moved toward the hallway step by step. The door was ajar. The air pouring out of the basement was ice cold, thick with the smell of earth and something damp. I reached out with a shaky hand, pushed the door open wider, and froze. The basement wasn't dark like I expected. A soft yellow light glowed from somewhere below, casting long shadows up the walls. Someone or something had turned on a light down there. Maya's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Chris? What are you doing?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. She was standing at the top of the stairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes, dressed in one of my old t-shirts. "Go back upstairs," I whispered. "I just need to check something." Her eyes followed mine to the open basement door, and her face paled instantly. "You opened it?" "I didn't. It opened by itself." The words sounded insane even as I said them, but Maya didn't argue. She just shook her head. "Let's call someone. A locksmith, maybe the police." "For what? To say our door opened by itself? That the house is playing games with us?" The truth was, I didn't even know what kind of help we needed. But I knew that whatever was down there, it wasn't going away. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and started down the stairs. Each step groaned under my weight like the house was waking up. The deeper I went, the colder the air became, until I could see my breath curling in front of me in soft, white tendrils. The basement was small, unfinished concrete floors, exposed wooden beams, old paint cans lining the far wall. And in the center of the floor, a hole. Not just any hole, a shallow grave. Fresh dirt. A shovel resting nearby. My stomach turned to ice. Who had been digging this? Or worse, what was it for? Behind me, the floor creaked. I spun around fast, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. No one there. Just shadows crawling along the edges of the walls, stretching in directions they shouldn't. Then from above, Maya screamed. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, nearly slipping on the last step as I burst into the hallway. The lights in the house were off. The front door was wide open. And Maya was gone. I ran outside, calling her name, my voice tearing through the empty night air. The yard was dead silent, no wind, no insects, nothing but the sound of my own panicked breathing. I circled around to the backyard, flashlight cutting wide arcs through the darkness. And that's when I saw it. The back door was open, leading back into the house. I stepped inside cautiously, heart hammering so loudly in my ears it drowned out every other sound. The house was dark. Too dark. I called out again, "Maya." But there was no answer. Then from the hallway a faint whisper. "Chris." I turned, following the sound toward the basement stairs. The door was open again. But this time the light below was gone. Just a pit of shadows waiting for me to step inside. I heard her voice again, closer now. "Chris, help me." But something about the way she said it didn't sound right. Her voice was too flat. Too cold. Like someone was trying to imitate her but didn't quite know how. I swallowed hard, staring into the darkness below. And then I realized the dirt on my shoes was fresh. But I hadn't been the one digging. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring down the open basement door. The whisper, Maya's voice, but wrong, still echoed faintly in my ears. "Chris, help me." It was too cold. Too empty. And deep down, some primal part of me already knew that wasn't her. But I had no choice. I had to go down there. The air thickened with every step, turning from cold to suffocating. My flashlight beam barely cut through the dark as I descended the stairs again, the shadows folding in around me like the house was swallowing me whole. The hole in the basement floor looked deeper now. Like someone or something had kept digging. And next to the fresh dirt, something new caught the edge of my flashlight beam. Footprints. Not boot prints like mine. Not barefoot like Maya's would have been. These were wrong. Too long. The toes pointed inward and the impressions pressed deeper into the dirt as if whatever made them was heavier than it should have been. I swallowed hard and stepped closer to the hole. The air stank of wet earth and something sharp like copper. I aimed the flashlight into the pit. At first, all I saw was dirt and loose roots. Then something shifted. A pale shape, half buried. Fingers. Human fingers barely poking out from the soil. My breath hitched. I stumbled back, bow rising in my throat. The journal's words screamed in my head. The door opens. Don't answer it. No matter who's knocking. And yet here I was answering anyway. "Chris." That voice again, closer this time. I whipped around, shining the light toward the far corner of the basement. A figure stood there. Not Maya. Me. Or something that looked like me. Same clothes. Same face. But the eyes wrong. Too dark. Too empty. And that smile thin and stretched too wide across its face. It didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. Just standing there was enough. I backed toward the stairs, every nerve screaming at me to run. Where's Maya? I choked out, my voice cracking. The thing tilted its head, its mouth opening slowly. Too slowly. She's in the dirt. The light in my hand flickered. The bulb sputtered and went out completely. I sprinted for the stairs, hands clawing for the railing in the dark. But before I could move more than a step, the door slammed shut. I was trapped. I fumbled for my phone, using its weak screen glow to light the space around me. The figure was gone. The basement was empty again, except for the hole, and the sound of something breathing deep in the darkness. I pressed myself against the wall, struggling to keep calm, but then my phone buzzed in my hand. A notification. New voicemail from Maya. I didn't remember my phone ringing. With shaking hands, I hit play. The message was only 3 seconds long. A single whisper. It's not me. I don't remember falling asleep down there. But when I woke up, sunlight was leaking through the basement window. The door at the top of the stairs was open again. I staggered upstairs, every muscle in my body screaming. The house was quiet. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. Just normal. Except Maya was still gone. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, screen shattered as if it had been thrown. I picked it up, the voicemail notification still glowing on the display. I couldn't bring myself to listen again. Instead, I went outside, desperate for some sign of her. That's when I noticed the fresh dirt in the backyard. Someone or something had been digging there too. I grabbed the shovel from the garage and started to dig. The ground was soft, like something had been buried recently. I dug until my arms burned, until the sweat ran into my eyes and the sun sat low on the horizon. And then my shovel hit something solid. Wood. A box, maybe? I dropped to my knees and clawed at the dirt with my hands until I uncovered it fully. It wasn't a box. It was a door. A small wooden hatch, like the entrance to a root cellar buried beneath the yard. One I hadn't seen before. The handle was old, rusted shut. I hesitated, breath shallow, but I knew if there were answers, they were down there. With one hard pull, the hatch groaned open. The air that poured out was ice cold, thick with the smell of rot and something older than death. And just before I climbed down, I noticed something carved into the underside of the door. Maya's waiting. I stared at the hatch. The words carved into the wood, Maya's waiting, felt like a punch to the chest. Every instinct screamed at me to close it, to cover the hole and pretend I never saw it. But Maya was somewhere. And this door wasn't going to close itself. I took a deep breath, grabbed the flashlight from the garage, and climbed down. The air was thick and wet, like breathing through a sponge soaked in mold. The space beneath the house wasn't a basement. It was more like a tunnel, narrow, low, and lined with rotting wooden beams that groaned under the weight of the house above. The deeper I moved, the more the air seemed to close in around me. That's when I noticed something in the dirt along the walls. Fingernail marks. Long, deep gouges running parallel to the ground. Like someone had been dragged through here. Or worse, like they had tried to claw their way out. I didn't call out for Maya. Not because I didn't want to. Because I didn't know who or what might answer back. About 30 feet in, the tunnel opened into a wider space. The beam from my flashlight caught something metallic glinting in the dirt. I knelt down and brushed the soil away until I uncovered what looked like a set of keys. Maya's keys. The blue plastic tag from her gym still hung from the keyring, caked in mud. The panic rising in my chest became unbearable, tightening around my ribs until it felt like I couldn't breathe. But I wasn't alone down there. I could feel it. A sound behind me breathing. Not close. Not yet. I spun around, the flashlight cutting jagged shadows across the walls, but there was nothing there. Nothing except the narrow tunnel leading back toward the hatch. I had a choice, keep going deeper or get out before the walls swallowed me whole. I chose to go deeper. The tunnel ended abruptly at another door. Old, wooden, reinforced with rusted iron bands. No handle. Just deep scratches around the edges of the frame like someone had tried to tear their way through from the inside. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. But when I placed my hand on the wood, it was warm. I didn't have to force the door open. It opened on its own. Inside was a small room. Concrete floor. Low ceiling. And in the middle of the room, a chair. Metal. Rusted. Bolted to the floor. Straps hung from the arms and legs, dangling loosely as if they'd been cut in a hurry. But it wasn't the chair that made my stomach lurch. It was what sat on the floor next to it. A recording device. One of those old handheld tape recorders covered in dust. I picked it up, wiped the dirt from the buttons, and pressed play. The tape hissed to life. Then a voice. Not Maya's. Mine. If you're listening to this, it's too late. I nearly dropped the recorder. My own voice, low and broken, filled the tiny room. I thought I could stop it. I thought if I stayed here long enough, if I listened to the house. A sharp breath. I could keep it quiet. But it doesn't want quiet. It wants to be remembered. A long pause. Don't go to the basement. Don't open the door. If you're hearing this, it's already open. The recording ended with a sharp click. The device whirred for a second longer. Then silence. I stood frozen, every muscle locked. What the hell was this? I had never made that recording. I had never even seen this room before. But it was my voice. My words. And they weren't wrong. The door was open. A noise behind me. Not breathing this time. Footsteps. Deliberate. Slow. I spun around and shone my flashlight toward the sound. A figure stood at the entrance to the room. Not the thing from the basement. Not the twisted reflection of myself. Maya. She looked wrong. Her skin was pale, her eyes too wide, her smile frozen like a mask. Chris, she whispered. But her voice was too flat. Too practiced. Like someone had heard her speak once and was trying to copy it. I backed away slowly, my heart slamming against my ribs. Where have you been? I managed to choke out. Her smile didn't change. I've been here the whole time. I remembered the voicemail. It's not me. Whoever or whatever was standing in front of me wasn't my wife. Then she spoke again. It's time to finish what we started, Chris. I gripped the recorder tighter, my fingers trembling. What do you mean? What started? Her head tilted to the side, eyes hollow and endless. You don't remember yet? You should. After all, you're the reason we're still here. Maya's eyes didn't blink. Not once. Her voice, flat, calm, and too perfect, echoed through the small, suffocating room. You don't remember yet, do you? My throat tightened. My pulse roared in my ears. You're not real, I whispered, taking a shaky step back. Her smile widened, but it wasn't Maya's smile. It was too smooth, too deliberate, like something pretending to be human. I am whatever you want me to be, Chris. And right now, you need me to be her. The tunnel behind me stretched endlessly, shadows folding in on themselves like the house was closing its throat. But deep down, part of me already knew. This wasn't the house doing this. It was me. I backed into the wall, the cold concrete biting into my shoulders. The recorder in my hand felt heavier than it should. I hit play again, desperate for anything that might help me make sense of this nightmare. The tape hissed and my own voice filled the room once more. You opened the door. You let it out. Now it won't stop until you finish what you started. The thing wearing Maya's face stepped closer, the air around it colder than the dirt beneath my feet. What did I start? I asked, my voice cracking. It stopped, tilting its head like a curious animal. You buried the truth. The flashlight in my hand flickered. The beam caught on something in the corner of the room. More dirt. But this wasn't just any pile of soil, it was shaped into a mound. Fresh. Like a grave. I stepped toward it, every cell in my body screaming not to. The thing behind me stayed silent, watching. I dropped to my knees and clawed at the dirt. My fingers tore through the soil, nails breaking, breath coming in short, sharp bursts. And then I felt it. Wood. A box, small and rotting at the edges. With shaking hands, I pulled it free and flipped open the lid. Inside was a phone. Maya's phone. Still on. Still recording. My hand shook as I pressed play. Her voice filled the space, weak and panicked. Chris, I don't know what's happening. You said it would stop if we moved. You said we could leave it all behind. Static swallowed her next words. Then a soft whisper, barely audible over the distortion. You promised it would stay buried. I dropped the phone like it burned me. The memories hit me all at once, like a door in my mind had been forced open. I remembered the old house. The arguments. The guilt. The accident. We were supposed to leave this behind. But you can't leave behind what you never faced. You buried the wrong thing, Chris. The voice was closer now, breathing against the back of my neck. You buried your guilt, but you never buried the truth. I spun around, but the thing wasn't there anymore. The tunnel was empty. The air was still. But the hole in the basement, the real hole, was waiting for me upstairs. I clawed my way back through the tunnel and climbed out into the cold night air. The backyard was eerily silent, every star above me swallowed by thick clouds. The door to the basement was wide open. I didn't need the flashlight to see it now. The hole was deeper than before. The earth around it churned like something had been digging from the inside out. I approached the edge slowly. And that's when I saw her. Maya. Lying at the bottom of the hole, eyes closed, skin pale under the moonlight. Maya. I jumped in without thinking, hitting the dirt hard and scrambling toward her. Her chest rose, she was breathing. I shook her gently. Wake up. Please, wake up. Her eyes opened. And they weren't hers anymore. You never buried me. The voice wasn't hers. It was mine, broken, hollow, and soaked in guilt. The ground beneath us began to shift. The walls of the hole closed in, dirt collapsing like the house itself was trying to swallow me whole. I tried to pull her up, but her hands gripped mine too tightly, nails digging into my skin. "Stay," she whispered. And for a moment I wanted to. Because down here, the guilt couldn't touch me. The memories couldn't hurt me. But then her face changed. The smile stretched, her skin turning gray, her eyes sinking deeper into her skull. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't Maya. I let go and scrambled toward the surface, clawing at the dirt, lungs burning. I pulled myself out just as the hole collapsed completely, burying whatever was left of her beneath the earth. I lay on the grass, gasping for air, the sky above me still black and endless. The house stood silent, its windows dark, its walls no longer breathing. I called the police the next morning. Told them everything except for the parts they wouldn't believe. They found the hole. But no sign of Maya. No sign of the tunnel. Nothing but fresh dirt and a rotting wooden box. I never went back to the house on Wren Street. But sometimes late at night, my phone buzzes with a new voicemail. No caller ID. No message. Just the sound of knocking. 3 slow taps. And then her voice, too faint to be real. "It's not over, Chris."